The average American retires at 62. Their body starts its most significant physical decline at 58. That 4-year gap between when the body starts failing and when the financial system tells you it's acceptable to stop is not an accident. It is, functionally, the retirement industry's most profitable design feature. But here's what they buried in 4 paragraphs of IRS code that your financial advisor has almost certainly never mentioned. You can access your 401k completely penalty-free at 55. Not 59 and a half, 55. And unlike most early retirement strategies that require you to stop working at 40 and survive on rice and index funds, this one works inside the conventional retirement system. It's not a workaround. It's written directly into the Internal Revenue Code. And the reason it's rarely discussed tells you more about the financial services industry than anything else I could say on this channel. This isn't really about early retirement. It's about a specific IRS provision that changes the entire timing conversation and about why the math that looks right on a spreadsheet can be catastrophically wrong when you factor in what actually happens to your body between 55 and 70. Because you're not just investing in a number, you're investing in a version of your life. And that version has an expiration date the retirement industry has zero incentive to tell you about. The provision is called the Rule of 55. And by the time this video is over, you will understand it well enough to build an actual plan around it, including the specific traps that turn it from a powerful tool into an expensive mistake for people who try to use it without the full picture. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. They use simplified return assumptions that ignore sequence of returns risk and don't model the tax bracket optimization I'm about to explain. It uses the same modeling logic that BlackRock and Vanguard use internally, and it will expose the specific weak points in your plan. I only ask for your email to send the report because I don't store any of your financial data on my end. Link is in the description. Now, here's the image I want you to hold in your mind for the entire video. Retirement accounts are like fruit. There's a window when that fruit is perfectly ripe. Pick it too early before the Rule of 55 window opens and you pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty, like biting into something that isn't ready yet. Wait too long and the fruit keeps growing on paper. More compound growth, more digits on the statement, but you might not have the teeth to eat it anymore. The Rule of 55 is about understanding precisely when your specific fruit is ripe. And the argument I'm going to make, backed by IRS code and actuarial data, is that ripeness arrives years before the retirement industrial complex will ever admit, because nobody in that industry profits from you picking your fruit on time. Let me start with the mechanics, because if you get even one of these details wrong, the whole strategy collapses. The Rule of 55 is written into the Internal Revenue Code at Section 72, subparagraph T, Clause 2, subclause A, Roman numeral 5. It says that if you separate from your employer in or after the calendar year you turn 55, you can take distributions from that employer's 401k or 403b plan without the standard 10% early withdrawal penalty. Separation means retirement, resignation, layoff, or termination. The IRS does not care why you left. The trigger is when, not why. You still pay ordinary income tax on every dollar you withdraw. That's not going away. But the 10% penalty that normally applies before age 59 and a half on a $200,000 withdrawal, that's $20,000. On a $500,000 withdrawal, that's $50,000, is completely eliminated. I said calendar year, and I meant it precisely. If you turn 55 in October and you separate from your company in January of that same year, you're eligible. You do not have to wait until after your birthday. January of the year you turn 55 is the earliest possible trigger date. This single detail pushes the effective earliest access date forward by up to 11 months for people who are planning to wait until their actual birthday. For someone who has been grinding through a job they've hated for 3 years, 11 months is not a rounding error. Now, in a few minutes, I'm going to show you why the tax math of early retirement might actually make you wealthier than staying in the workforce another decade. But first, you need to understand the trap that catches almost every person who tries to use this rule without knowing the full picture, because it's the kind of mistake that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and is completely invisible until it's too late to fix. The rule of 55 only applies to your current employer's plan, not your IRA, not 401ks from previous jobs. Only the account sitting inside the plan of the employer you are actively separating from at the moment of separation. Think about how many people change jobs 2 or 3 times over a 25-year career and roll their old 401ks into IRAs each time. Because every financial publication you've ever read tells you to do exactly that. Consolidate your accounts. Simplify your financial life. It's advice that sounds correct in isolation. In the context of the rule of 55, it can be extremely costly. Once that money is in an IRA, it's governed entirely by IRA rules, and IRA rules say no exceptions before 59.5. The rule of 55 does not exist in IRA territory. That money is locked regardless of when you leave your job. Here's what the person who actually understands this rule does differently. Before they leave, and I mean well before, not in the final weeks of employment, they contact their current employer's HR department and initiate a rollover of all old 401ks into the current employer's plan. Most plans accept incoming rollovers from other qualified plans. The money consolidates under the current employer umbrella, and when separation happens, the entire balance, including every dollar from previous employers, falls under the rule of 55 penalty exemption. The fruit is all on one tree, and it's all ripe at the same moment. But there's still a trap inside this trap. Not every 401k plan allows systematic periodic withdrawals after separation. Some plans require a lump sum distribution, meaning you either take everything at once or you leave it there. If you're forced to take a $1.5 million lump sum in a single calendar year, you will be in the 37% federal tax bracket on a significant chunk of that distribution. The rule of 55 waives the penalty. It does not waive income tax. A forced lump sum scenario could cost you more in taxes than the penalty you avoided, making the entire strategy counterproductive. This is why before you do anything else, you need to read your plan's summary plan description. Your employer is legally required to provide you this document. Find the section on distribution options for separated employees specifically. If the only option listed is lump sum, you have a different problem to solve. One solution. Some people have intentionally moved to employers with more flexible plan structures in the years before their plan separation date, specifically to have better distribution options available under the rule of 55. That sounds like a lot of work. It is considerably less work than losing 37 cents of every dollar to taxes on a forced lump sum. For public safety workers, police officers, firefighters, emergency medical technicians, there's an additional provision almost nobody in those fields knows about. The age threshold drops from 55 to 50. If you qualify as a public safety employee under the IRS definition, you can access your governmental retirement plan penalty-free beginning at 50. That's 5 additional years of access on jobs that tend to have significant cumulative physical demands. If you're in one of those fields and your financial advisor has never mentioned this, I don't know what to tell you about what else they've missed. Now, here's where most retirement conversations end. Here's where this one gets more interesting. You think the problem with retiring early is running out of money. That's the fear people carry. That's the fear the financial advisory industry is very good at feeding. But the actual biggest risk, the one that shows up consistently in the data, is not running out of money. It's running out of time while you still have the money and the health to use it simultaneously. That window is narrower than anyone will tell you, and understanding its actual dimensions changes the whole calculation. I want to introduce a framework I call the 3-window model of retirement health because it maps onto the actuarial data more accurately than anything the retirement industry typically shows you. Window 1, the go-go years. Roughly 55 to 68 for a reasonably healthy person. High physical capacity, high cognitive energy, low medical burden. This is when you hike, travel, sleep in uncomfortable beds in foreign countries, carry your own luggage, eat things you probably shouldn't, and don't think twice about an 8-hour layover in a city you've never seen. Window 2, the slow-go years, roughly 68 to 78. You're still mobile, still engaged with the world, but the ambitions scale down. Shorter trips, more familiar destinations, better hotels, Earlier bedtimes. Window 3, the no-go years, post 78 or whenever chronic conditions accumulate past a personal threshold. You're still alive, possibly for another 15 years. You may even be comfortable, but the version of retirement you imagine at 45, that version required the body you had at 58. Here is the actuarial truth the financial industry doesn't model for you. According to the Health and Retirement Study, conducted by the University of Michigan and funded by the National Institute on Aging, one of the longest-running longitudinal studies of aging adults in America, roughly 1 in 4 men between 65 will experience a significant health event that limits physical mobility or functional capacity. By 65, the probability of having at least one chronic condition affecting daily activity exceeds 60%. By 72, it's above 75%. These aren't projections of catastrophic illness. These are projections of the kind of mobility limitation that changes what retirement looks like on a Tuesday. A back condition that ends hiking, knees that ground you from long travel days, a cardiac event that makes international trips a logistical negotiation rather than an adventure. David Blanchett, the Morningstar researcher who documented the retirement spending smile, the empirical pattern showing that retirement spending is highest in the early years, drops through the middle, and then spikes again at the end on healthcare. Found in subsequent research that the typical retiree's real spending declines roughly 1 to 2% per year throughout retirement. That sounds like good news for your portfolio. It's not good news for your life. The reason spending drops isn't contentment. It's capability progressively eliminating options. You're not choosing not to spend on adventure travel at 74. The adventure is choosing not to accommodate you. By the way, hit subscribe if this is landing for you, because the YouTube algorithm is genuinely capricious. And if you don't subscribe, it may not show you my videos again, despite the fact that you've made it this far into a video about retirement tax strategy, which tells me you're probably exactly the person this channel is built for. There's a secondary story running through all of this that I want to introduce here and resolve later, because it illustrates something about how people actually make these decisions versus how they think they make them. A woman, I'll call her Carol, spent 31 years as a project manager at a mid-size insurance company. By 54, she had $800,000 in her 401k, a paid-off house, zero debt, and actual annual spending of around $60,000. She found out about the rule of 55, ran the numbers herself, and confirmed they worked. She could have retired comfortably at 55, but she didn't. I'll tell you what stopped her and what happened as a result in a few minutes, because it's the most important part of this entire conversation. Now, here's the angle that will genuinely surprise you, because it proves that the financial advisor's chart, the one showing you'd have more money if you work longer, is solving the wrong equation entirely. When you're earning a high salary and contributing to a traditional 401k, you're saving on taxes at your current marginal rate. If you're in the 22 or 24% bracket, every dollar deferred saves you 22 to 24 cents today. That's real value. But here's what the deferred tax architecture actually means. You'll owe ordinary income tax on every single dollar when you eventually withdraw it. The question has never been whether you pay tax. The question is always at what rate. When you retire at 55, before Social Security income starts, full retirement age for anyone born after 1960 is 67. And before required minimum distributions kick in at 73, you can structure your income so your taxable income is very low. We're talking potentially 12% bracket or even 10% bracket territory. And that creates something the retirement industry calls a Roth conversion window. It's one of the most powerful tax optimization opportunities in the American tax code. And it is structurally unavailable to people who are still employed at a high income. Here's how it works. You take money from your traditional 401k or IRA and move it to a Roth account. You pay income tax on the converted amount at your current bracket rate. Everything in the Roth then grows completely tax-free for the rest of your life. Your heirs inherit it tax-free. The lower the bracket at which you execute the conversion, the more powerful the strategy. If you convert $50,000 while in the 12% bracket, you pay $6,000 in federal tax. That same $50,000 left in the traditional account and withdrawn at 68 when Social Security income has pushed you into the 22% bracket, generates $11,000 in federal tax on withdrawal, before accounting for the fact that the tax-deferred growth was also destined to be taxed. You save $5,000 on that single year's conversion. Multiply that across a decade of strategic conversions, and you're talking about a meaningful lifetime tax number that conventional retirement planning simply never models. But here's the critical tension between the rule of 55 and the Roth conversion strategy. And this is where sequencing becomes a skill that separates good planning from great planning. If you're pulling substantial 401k income under the rule of 55 just to cover living expenses, say $60,000 or $70,000 per year, you filled your low tax bracket with ordinary income. There's no room left for Roth conversions. The two strategies are competing for the same bracket capacity. The solution is income source sequencing. In the early years of retirement, draw from your taxable brokerage account first. Sell appreciated positions. For a single filer in 2026, long-term capital gains are taxed at 0%. If your total income stays below approximately $49,000, the threshold is adjusted for inflation each year and has been rising steadily. You could realize $30,000 or $40,000 in capital gains in a year and pay zero federal tax on that income, as long as your 401k withdrawals and other ordinary income don't push you over the threshold. While you're doing this, keep the 401k withdrawals smaller just enough to cover the gap between your brokerage income and your actual spending, and use whatever is left of the 12% bracket for Roth conversions. This is fruit management at its most precise. You're picking the right fruit in the right order to minimize tax waste and maximize the after-tax value of everything that remains. Quick aside, I was explaining this sequencing strategy to someone at a dinner, walked them through the whole logic. At the end they said, "So the trick is to have less reportable income?" I said yes, essentially. They looked at me like I'd suggested something illegal. Welcome to the tax code, where the winning move is sometimes earning less on paper, and the people who figure that out quietly have significantly better retirements than the people still trying to maximize their W-2. Now let me build out one concrete scenario with real numbers, so this doesn't stay theoretical. I'll call him David. He's 54, works in tech-adjacent operations management, earns $180,000 per year. He has $1.3 million in his current employer's 401k, $200,000 in old 401ks from 2 prior jobs, and $150,000 in a taxable brokerage account of index funds. He owns his home outright. His actual annual spending, confirmed by 12 months of bank statements, not what he thinks he spends, is $70,000 per year. He has not genuinely liked his job in 3 years. His sleep is poor. He's missed family events for work travel multiple times in the past year. His financial advisor's recommendation, work until 62, maximize Social Security, allow compound growth to work in his favor. Projected 401k balance at 62, roughly $2 million. The advisor shows him a chart. The chart is mathematically accurate. The chart is solving for the wrong variable. Here's what David actually does. At 53, he contacts HR and initiates rollovers of both old 401ks into his current employer's plan. The plan accepts incoming rollovers. $1.5 million now sits in the current plan, all of it eligible for Rule of 55 treatment. He separates from the company in January of the calendar year he turns 55, full eligibility on the entire $1.5 million. Year 1 withdrawal strategy. $35,000 from the 401k as ordinary income. $15,000 from selling taxable brokerage positions, long-term capital gains. $20,000 from Roth contribution basis he's accumulated over the years, which comes out completely tax-free, no tax event at all. Total spending covered $70,000. Total taxable income, $50,000, consisting of $35,000 in ordinary income and $15,000 in capital gains. After his standard deduction of approximately $15,000, his taxable ordinary income is around $20,000. His $15,000 in capital gains stack on top, but because his ordinary income is well below the 0% capital gains threshold. A significant portion of those capital gains is taxed at 0%. His total federal tax bill for the year, under $4,000. Effective rate on $70,000 of total spending, under 6%. Healthcare. His projected income structure qualifies him for Affordable Care Act subsidies in his state. His monthly premium after subsidy comes out to $320. He had budgeted $500. He comes in $180 per month under budget on the item that most commonly destroys early retirement plans. The Roth conversion layer, with $35,000 in 401k income as his primary ordinary income source, and the standard deduction reducing taxable income to around $20,000, he's deep inside the 12% bracket. He runs a $15,000 Roth conversion each year, paying $1,800 in federal tax on that conversion. Over 10 years before Social Security begins, he converts $150,000 into a Roth at 12% total federal tax paid on those conversions, $18,000. That same $150,000 left in the traditional account and withdrawn at 68 when Social Security income pushes him into the 22% bracket, $33,000 in federal tax. He saves $15,000 in lifetime tax through this sequencing, and that's before accounting for any tax-free growth inside the Roth account itself. At 65, Medicare replaces the marketplace plan. He turns on Social Security at 66 at a reduced benefit, roughly $2,100 per month. His 401k balance at 65, even after 10 years of $35,000 annual withdrawals plus conversions, is still above $900,000 because the remaining balance compounded at a reasonable market rate through his early retirement years. His Roth account is above $200,000, all of it tax-free. David's financial advisor was correct that working until 62 would have produced a larger 401k balance. He failed to model the 0% capital gains window, the Roth conversion arbitrage, the ACA subsidy, the tax efficiency of a structurally lower income in retirement, or the value David would assign to spending his healthiest decade doing exactly what he wanted with a body that could still do it. He was solving one variable in a multivariable equation and calling it comprehensive planning. Now, here's the part that makes me genuinely uncomfortable to say, because it requires sitting with a statistical reality that runs directly against the narrative the financial industry tells you. You think the biggest risk of retiring early is running out of money. That's the risk that gets all the attention, all the Monte Carlo simulations, all the pie charts and sequence of returns analysis. It's real, and I'm not dismissing it. But based on the data, the risk that is dramatically underweighted in conventional retirement planning is this. You retire involuntarily because your body made the decision before you did. Except now the timing is completely wrong. Your financial structure wasn't built for it, and you're doing it from a hospital bed rather than an airport. The Society of Actuaries conducts a major survey on retirement risk every 2 years. Their data consistently shows that approximately 42% of retirees left the workforce earlier than they had planned to, not because they wanted to, because they were forced out by health events, by corporate layoffs, by family caregiving demands that became impossible to balance with full-time employment, by company restructurings that eliminated their roles. 42%, that is not a tail risk. That is almost a coin flip. Model what that means for someone who planned to work until 65. They have the savings of a 58-year-old because they budgeted on 7 more years of contributions and market growth. They are potentially facing elevated spending because the reason they stopped working was a health event. And they have the psychological profile of someone who had the timing stripped from them, not someone who made a deliberate, autonomous decision. The research on involuntary retirement is unambiguous. People forced out of the workforce before they were ready show measurably higher rates of depression, faster cognitive decline in the first 5 years post-retirement, and worse physical health outcomes than people who retired on their own terms and timeline. The control over the decision matters as much as the financial plan attached to it. The rule of 55 is, more than anything else, a tool for ensuring that if you're going to leave the workforce in your mid to late 50s, you do it on your schedule, with your tax strategy intact, with your healthcare modeled correctly, with an identity beyond your job title that you've had time to build deliberately. Not because your spine made the call and your employer found someone 20 years younger at 60% of the salary. Here's a story that lands this better than any actuarial table. A man named James spent 28 years as a structural engineer at a construction firm. At 53, he ran his numbers carefully and concluded he had enough to leave. His financial advisor produced a projection showing that if James worked until 60, the additional contributions and compound growth would add roughly $300,000 to his final balance. James stayed. 2 years later, at 54, the firm was restructured in a private equity acquisition. James was laid off. The separation happened in October of the year he was 54. The rule of 55 requires the calendar year of your 55th birthday. He was 1 year and 2 months away from penalty-free access on $1.1 million. He took a lower-paying contract role to bridge the gap, 12 months of his life, in a role he found meaningless. To avoid a 10% penalty he'd have paid on whatever he chose to withdraw. The $300,000 of projected additional growth his advisor told him he was leaving on the table by not working until 60, he never saw it. What he saw was an involuntary separation, a year of financial anxiety, and the slow realization that the plan he was sold had assumed employment stability that turned out to be a variable, not a constant. His story isn't extreme. His story is in the 42%. Now let me come back to Carol. Carol, who had $800,000 and a paid-off house at 54, who ran the numbers and confirmed they worked, who had every practical reason to retire at 55. She didn't leave because she told herself she'd feel better with 1 million. She got close to 1 million and moved the target to 1 million 2. She got there and adjusted to 1 million 5. These targets felt rational. They felt financially responsible. She was not running the numbers wrong. She was running the wrong calculation entirely. What Carol was actually experiencing is what behavioral finance researchers call the threshold effect, a well-documented phenomenon where people set a specific financial target, approach it, and then shift the target upward, rather than confronting the question the target was supposed to answer. What do I actually want my life to look like? The number isn't the goal. The number is a way of postponing the goal. Working is a highly effective mechanism for avoiding the discomfort of answering the question of what you want when the job is no longer there to define you. Carol got laid off at 58 in a company merger. The rule of 55 window was open. 58 is past 55. The penalty exemption applied. She was financially fine. She was not fine with those 3 years. The fruit was ripe at 55. She watched it get incrementally larger and watched her window for using it optimally get narrower, while telling herself a story about prudence that was actually a story about anxiety. She knows this now. She said it explicitly. The moving target was never about money. Second, quick aside. Someone emailed me last week to say my content was too focused on leaving the workforce and not enough on the dignity of work. I want to be absolutely clear. I have genuine respect for work. Some of the most fulfilled people I know work well into their 70s because they find it meaningful and chosen. This video is not for them. This video is for the people whose Sunday nights are ruined by what's waiting on Monday, who have been telling themselves 1 more year for 3 years running, and whose financial advisor's most recent conversation was about maximizing a balance on a chart without once asking whether that balance would ever actually be spent on something worth having. Dignity of work is real. Dignity of choosing what you do with your finite time is also real. Only one of those is being sold to you as a financial product. Let me give you the 3 specific things to actually do, calibrated to this specific strategy and no one else's generic retirement advice. 1, call your current employer's HR department this week and ask 2 questions in exactly this order. First, does the plan accept incoming rollovers from other qualified plans? Second, for separated employees, what distribution options are available specifically? Is systematic periodic withdrawal an option, or only lump sum? If the answer to the first question is yes, Start the rollover process for every old 401k you have sitting at previous employers or in IRAs that originally came from 401ks. Do this before you're within 1 year of your planned exit. The window closes the moment you separate. And if the answer to the second question is lump sum only, you now know you have a plan structure problem that needs solving before the rule of 55 is useful to you. 2. Model your healthcare costs specifically, not approximately. Go to healthcare.gov and use the subsidy estimator with your projected retirement income, remembering that 401k withdrawals count as ordinary income and affect your subsidy calculation. For most people who structure early retirement income below $50,000 in taxable income, the ACA subsidy is substantially larger than they expected. Healthcare cost is the single item that blows up early retirement plans more reliably than market volatility. Do not estimate. Get the number for your state, your age, your projected income. 3. Find a fee-only financial planner, meaning they charge a flat fee for a specific engagement, not a percentage of your assets under management. Ask them to model your Roth conversion strategy across a 12 to 15-year early retirement window, sequencing your income sources against the 12 and 22% brackets. The fee for this kind of engagement typically runs between $2,000 and $5,000. That is almost certainly less than what you save in a single year of well-executed Roth conversions. Do not hire someone on an assets under management model to help you figure out how to stop giving them assets to manage. The incentive structure does not support the advice you need. The fruit is ripe. The question is whether you pick it when it's ready or leave it on the tree, because the institutions that collect fees on it, staying there, told you it'll grow bigger if you wait. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the difference between the guy with one first nader, 0.4 million in his 401k, who can't board a long-haul flight without wincing, and the guy with 900,000 who sent a photo from Patagonia isn't account balance. It's that one of them read 4 paragraphs of tax